Hello, everybody. Edre here, and for anybody new here, I make casual reviews, and it is just my opinion, so take everything I say with a massive grain of salt. And I'm really excited to be doing this new album review, well, actually an EP review, of the third Chimpanzee by none other than Martin Gore, who is right there on my poster. And right there on my poster. If you can't tell, I like Depeche Mode. If you're new to this channel, I like them quite a bit. I've talked about them quite a bit, and actually, on Friday, I just put out my tier ranking. I should have waited until this came out, now that I think about it. But to say the least, they are one of those groups that I've enjoyed everything they've put out, both with the band and some of their solo material. I think they are some of the best artists out there, and just personal favorites of mine. So going into this, I had relatively high expectations, but I also kind of knew I was going to enjoy it. Because there was no incentive for me to be disappointed at this point, because the single that I had already heard was good. The two singles were already good. I have already enjoyed quite a bit from Martin's MG project a lot, and considering after hearing the first two singles I liked it even more than the original MG project, I had no reason to be nervous. And I'm glad, because going into this, I'm really glad how it turned out. And I just want to get a little into some of the tracks here. And we're actually going to talk about all of them. Musically, this EP instrumentally goes down a similar sound to his MG album, which came out back in 2015. But I do think that the tone is actually even more dark and even a bit more experimental. His vocal, it's an instrumental album once again, but I guess there actually is some vocals on here. But they're sampled. His vocals, he took them, sampled them, put a lot of distortion on them, put a lot of filters on them, and ended up treating it like another instrument, which I love. He used it to create more ambiance, more atmosphere into this project, which I like quite a bit. And the opening track, Howler, is really the perfect kind of representation of everything going on this project. It is a great example of the more experimental elements of this album, with the distorted electronic soundscape. It's really really dark, but it's a really good landscape that was really laid out right off the bat. I also think that there is a great little synth melody at the end of this song as well, that he repeats as in a sort of a refrain or reprise at the end of this EP on Howler's end. And it's just a great display of his experimentation with electronic, synthesizers, and also just a great representation of how he could bring those catchy, good synth melodies in there as well and still manage to make it work. The next song, however, Mandrill, is definitely my favorite on here. This was the first single that came out last year, and I really like this one quite a bit. It's, once again, a great blend of the experimental elements of this EP, but with a bit more industrial sounds, which is something I am always looking forward to when it comes on to Martin and his music and Depeche Mode in general. I love it when they get a little more industrial, when they bring a bit more aggression into their sound. Especially the percussion on this track sounds very industrial, as well as just the dirty, distorted, and very gritty and dirty sounding synth bass on this song, and just all throughout it. The distortion on this is really great. I love how, and the progression as well is very dark, very Depeche Mode sounding. I would love to hear a song like Mandrel be put on the table whenever Depeche Mode make another album, because I would love to hear Dave Gahan's vocals over a song like this. And but I genuinely do think that the more industrial landscape of Mandrill, the more just distorted elements of it, just really make this a standout song in my opinion. The following song, Capuchin, I think that's how you say it, kind of feels like a modernized throwback to some of their material on Construction Time again a little bit. Definitely an interesting track here. It uses some of those flute-esque sounding synths that you would have heard on a song like Everything Counts or Pipeline back in the day, and it's really interesting. This actually has a lot of sonic similarities to Pipeline from Construction Time again, but in many ways modernized, revised, and honestly even more grandiose than before. I think that the use of the off-putting synth melodies as well really make the song stand out, so it doesn't just sound like him, throwing it back. It still sounds very abstract, very avant-garde, and I think it was great. Once again, I think that those oddly electronic and industrial drums, once again, just for something about this EP screams a new Depeche Mode album rather than his MG album 6 years ago. I don't know what it is exactly, but I think the more industrial elements here really just, I could totally see this working on a Depeche Mode album. Vervet, the track Vervet, is an 8-minute long epic song that really takes you for an adventure. I wouldn't say it's necessarily my all-time favorite on this album, but there is like this nice little synth bell melody throughout it. Overall, a relatively solid track, and I think it's really the last major real track on this album, or EP, and it definitely shows him continuing to explore. The final track on here is Howler's End. The EP closes with the synth melody that appears at the end of the opening track, Howler, and it's just sparse. It's a very sparse, short track with just that melody, a few ambiance going on in the background, and overall, I think it is the perfect closer. After all that, I think that is the best melody on the album, and I think it was a beautiful way to end this EP. Overall, I just feel like the third Chimpanzee EP feels like a direct window into Martin Gore's creativity and his mind and what he's probably been up to during quarantine at home. It isn't as polished as his work with Depeche Mode, and I realize that, but I also don't care too much because this is just an EP, this is a solo project, and it's much more sporadic and just much more hectic, and I think that actually fits the tone of the EP perfectly, that fits the tone of how I imagine he's probably feeling right now. So overall, I was left very satisfied with the third Chimpanzee EP, just as I was hoping, and I have settled on giving Martin Gore's The Third Chimpanzee EP an electric 8 out of 10. Anybody that's new here needs to know anything above a 5 is good, anything below a 5 is negative. So an 8 out of 10 is a really positive review. I also want to just make one thing clear. One of my kind of personal policies is that I don't give EPs higher than an 8, just because they are EPs, they are shorter, unless they're as long as an album. This one isn't. So this is the highest score an EP can get. Really a great project. I'd love to see if Martin goes even a step further and manages to make a full-length album, but if he's holding it off because a Depeche Mode one might be around the corner, I am perfectly fine with that. I'd love to hear what Depeche Mode does next because I have yet to be disappointed, and this EP from Martin himself is great. With that being said, adios, amigos.